So Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis is finally here. What a story this film has, decades in the making. Something Coppola talked about as early as the 1970s, a decade where Coppola towered above all other filmmakers. His maverick decisions bankrupted him and forced him to take paycheck movies in the 80s and 90s, but then the movie was ready to roll in the early noughties, but was shelved after 9/11 and fully abandoned in 2007. Coppola has made 3 little scene movies since the turn of the century, but really Megalopolis is his first proper mainstream film in about 25 years since The Rainmaker. In what is the biggest middle finger to corporate Hollywood I can think of in a long time, the legendary filmmaker, well into his 80s, sold off parts of his winery and self-financed the entire $120 million budget. It's a fantastic story. The making of the film, in of itself, is a great story. But at the end of all this lies an actual movie, one critics called crazy and nothing like they'd ever seen in previews. And as for this review, I want to divorce the film from the story behind it, to talk just about Megalopolis itself, completely detached from the making of it. Of course, we'd all love for this to be Francis Ford Coppola's big comeback, his final hurrah, the legendary film director of The Godfather and Apocalypse Now coming out of the shadows for one last masterpiece. Or maybe even a misunderstood picture which ages like fine wine and becomes a hidden gem, as the now recalled trailer suggested. But let's ignore all of that and talk about the film itself. So in Megalopolis, Adam Driver plays an architect, Caesar, who has the ability to stop time. To be honest, this ability is not as important to the film as you might think, though its inclusion isn't too distracting because the movie does have a very theatrical, almost dreamlike, magical realism quality to it, so a character having the ability to stop and start time doesn't seem too out of the ordinary. As the title card says, it's a fable. So this guy has grand ideas for what the future of the city should look like, a utopia, a land of marvel and fortune, but his rival, Mayor Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito, wants the city to remain as it is, and what it is pretty much a crime-infested hellhole for the poor and a materialistic, hedonistic haven for the rich. Cicero's daughter, played by Nathalie Emmanuel, meets with Caesar initially to confront him about the way he talks about her dad in public, but she falls in love with both Caesar and his vision for the future, and thus is caught in between her father and her lover. This core story, pretty simple when you think about it, has the backdrop of a film that feels like a Greek theatre performance brought to life, and meshed with the surreal drug trips of an already very hippie director. I'm serious. There were reports on set of Coppola spending a lot of his time smoking weed in his trailer, then coming out and having completely new ideas about what they were going to be shooting that day, to the astonishment of the crew. And you really do get a sense of that in the film. There are all sorts of abstract, balmy images loaded throughout the movie. It's like Coppola was sitting in his trailer smoking pot and had a vision of a man with 10 arms having a seizure. So he thought, oh, that was cool, I'll put that in the movie. And then he was reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius on a lunch break and came across a quote which he had to slap into the film. Not before getting Lawrence Fishburne to spew seemingly random Latin quotes for the movie's voiceover. Honestly, I really liked the premise of the movie, but it didn't really move past the idea of 2 competing visions and a woman torn between 2 men. It didn't go hard enough into their different philosophies, aside from one scene where they talk over a game of cards. That's the premise, and that's also the entire film. It doesn't really move, it doesn't really develop, up until the very quickly resolved and rushed ending. It's a pretty simple story, it just has a lot of random shit thrown at it. About halfway through, the movie switches gears and focuses on a manifesting subplot of Cicero's wealthy uncle, played by Jon Voight, whose son or nephew, I can't remember, played by Shia LaBeouf, hates Caesar and is desperately committed to his downfall, framing him for a crime, for example. In and amongst this are quite a few jumbled ideas that never really take off, from a man who is trying to say too much, and it can come off as nonsensical. The idea of a Francis Ford Coppola modern epic on the fall of Rome sounds great. In execution, it's interesting to say the least. I did not dislike Megalopolis, in fact I had a lot of fun with it, but for sure it is a movie made by an artsy-fartsy director, perhaps the apex of artistic film directors, who was on drugs and completely unrestrained by, say, producers on set telling him to reel things back in or make the movie more streamlined. The movie is a gigantic mess, a product of a child with a lot of vision and money, but none of the restraint or discipline to keep himself in check. As such, the movie is a fascinating watch, but eventually, in all honesty, I think it won't be something people remember in a couple of weeks. The story of the movie making it to the screens is more interesting than the film itself, and there isn't enough audaciousness in the film itself to justify too much talk over it. Just a lot of weird images and half-assed ideas delivered in character expositions and speeches. Megalopolis is very theatrical and goofy. In some places this is clearly intentional, in others I'm not quite sure what Coppola was thinking. For example, characters often talk in Shakespearean-style soliloquies and the performances are exaggerated, but I don't think the actors were necessarily on the same page as Coppola. You can see what he was trying to do with some scenes, mimic and play off the kinds of plays and literature Coppola is obviously in love with, but I don't think many of the actors were able to pull it off. You need certain kinds of performances with this kind of movie where the actors are completely synced with the tone of the film, like a Wes Anderson movie where everyone is clearly in on the joke, they all know how to play the part, or in Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear remake where the actors seem to know they're supposed to be in a hammy film, so they adjust accordingly, or Barry Lyndon, a movie which feels like it's taking the piss out of his characters even though everything is played straight. At times it works here, a lot of the times it doesn't, as if the actors didn't know what was going on but wouldn't dare question the genius of Coppola, so just ploughed ahead. The movie feels like one where everything is supposed to be over the top and the characters are larger than life, like a Dick Tracy film. They're types, they're caricatures, ripped from the pages of Roman history. Shia LaBeouf, I think, got it. Aubrey Plaza too. Adam Driver, a guy who I think is a good actor, but I've never felt the wow factor from him, didn't impress me, and the film needed a stronger lead, and one more in tune with the tone Coppola was going for, a very difficult tone to get right. Plus the character is a complex one, charismatic but brooding. I was thinking as I watched it of a younger Pacino or a Harrison Ford in his prime, and I think the film would have instantly been improved. A lot of actors seem to be having the time of their lives, whereas drivers seem to be taking it all a bit too seriously. Of course, I describe the film as a middle finger to corporate Hollywood, but at times I felt like Coppola's middle finger was nestled directly in front of my face. A major conflict in the film is resolved, for example, when an elderly character who looks like a corpse pretends he has a massive boner under his bedsheets before pulling out a crossbow or something and killing one enemy and shooting the other in the ass twice. And the way it unfolds, it feels like it's something that was supposed to come off as dramatic melodrama, but really was goofy and laughable. There was even a twinkle sound effect when the crossbow was unleashed. Not to mention, Megalopolis isn't exactly a great looking picture. Some scenes look straight out of a direct-to-DVD movie, and there's so much orange in the film, I wanted to run out of the cinema and take a good whiff of the natural outdoors. Some scenes are objectively bad. There's a part where a building is demolished and CGI smoke spreads about, but it doesn't go anywhere near a bunch of extras who are otherwise waving away invisible dust that the director had clearly told them would be added in post later. There's an indoor coliseum scene, which I actually kinda liked, but a lot of the actors like Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight were pointing at things and making exclamations, and it was pretty blatant they had no idea what was going on or what they were supposed to be doing. Coppola just said point and go, "Ah." Nothing was of any consequence. Driver loses the ability to control time but gets it back about a scene later. A character is shot in the face and loses an eye but returns to normal a few scenes later. What's going on? According to Wikipedia, Coppola adopted an experimental style that permitted improvisation during the shoot by letting actors write scenes and himself make spontaneous changes to the script. These methods proved divisive, leading to the resignation of the art department and visual effects team. It's chaotic and volatile filmmaking from an author who gets so lost in his themes he forgets to frame them around a proper story. Like, why exactly were the public rioting? What exactly was Caesar's idea of a utopia, aside from some scribbles he did of a futuristic-looking city with glowing escalators? Why did Shia dress up like a woman and bang his sister? How is a satellite crashing into a city and nuking it done in about 10 seconds and never mentioned again? Some of the narrative techniques were very interesting though. The transitions and all that kind of stuff. There's shades of Coppola's Dracula. If the movie was black and white, you could see some scenes straight out of a 1940s noir, like when Voight gives control of the company to his wife. The way that's played out in the movie is very bombastic and pretty decent. I know this gets said a lot, but when the credits started to roll, I genuinely thought to myself, what the heck did I just watch? I looked around for support from the 4 or 5 other people in the screening, but the mood in the room was one of confusion and uncertainty. There's a scene where Shia LaBeouf is walking and he throws his hat on the floor for no reason and tells his minion to pick up his hat. The minion throws his hat on the floor and tells the guy behind him to pick up his hat before he picks up LaBeouf's. And the chain goes back around 5 people just doing the same thing. Did Coppola just think this would be weird and cool? Is this one of Shia's contributions to the film? Or is this a metaphor for man's need for control and sense of power which trickles down from the top? No time to discuss because the movie will very quickly move on to the next weird scene, or a scene of a character philosophizing supposed grand ideas in front of a crappy green screen. Honestly, remove Coppola's name and I don't think most people give this film the time of the day. Did I mention that the dialogue is excruciatingly bad? You better hope the characters don't stop quoting Hamlet, because otherwise we get gems like, "You're anal as hell, Caesar. I, on the other hand, am oral as hell." In 1972 we got, "I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse." In 1979 we got the horror. In 2024 we get, "What do you think of this boner I got?" So you gotta give it to Coppola, he took a big swing. Whether he landed the punch, well, what do you think of this film? Let me know in the comments section below, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.